The first day of the NFL draft is in the books, and the Raiders selection at 13 left a lot of Raider Nation scratching their head. We'll talk about that plus a whole lot more on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for April 26, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thanks so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, we got a shout out to my man Ari. Does a great job getting us up on YouTube each and every day. And of course, Raider Nation, we got to salute you for supporting the show, checking us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Like I said, we definitely appreciate that. But again, Ari's on Twitter at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well at your boy Q254. And we've got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. And as you can imagine, as you were glued to your seats watching the first round of the NFL draft, I got a lot of feedback following the Raiders selection at number 13 of Brock Bowers, a tight end out of Georgia. Not because it was a bad pick, but left a lot of Raider Nation scratching their head wondering why that was the pick. So a lot of feedback in segment number 3. We'll get to that. Segment number 2, have a couple different ideas for segment number 2, and it really depends on how far we deep dive here in segment number 1. But we could start to look ahead at what the Raiders could do in rounds 2 and 3, which comes up Friday night, obviously, and then 4, 5, 6, and 7 is on Saturday, and that's when I'll be flying back to Las Vegas. So we'll kind of play it by ear. We may kind of deep dive a little bit more into Brock Bowers in segment number 2 based off what happens here in segment number 1 and what our time is looking like. So we'll jump right into what we got going on, talk all things Brock Bowers, and we'll do that as soon as I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidate you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So as you know already, unless you've been under a rock, the Raiders selected tight end Brock Bowers from Georgia at number 13. And I'm not going to lie to you. I'll be fully transparent. My reaction was probably the same as yours. It wasn't a mad one. It wasn't angry. It was just why. I was a little confused, scratched my head a little bit. I had people hitting me up, texting me and tweeting me and saying, what do you think about that? And I was like, hey, look, I wasn't looking at Brock Bowers as a guy that the Raiders could be looking at pick number 13. And so for a while, and it's funny, so many people were here in the media room, were kind of looking at me. They know that I cover the Raiders like a glove and were talking to me. And, I was actually on the radio live in El Paso when the pick came through. And the guys looked at me and said, well, what do you think? And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm just a little confused, right? Again, because we had spent so much time talking about offensive line, cornerback, quarterback, right? We had spent so many different shows talking about these certain positions that we just knew the Raiders were going to attack. And they didn't. They went with tight end. Like there was never a time when tight end was on my radar. And even when I did a deep dive on Georgia when their pro day, I was really more looking at Mims, their offensive tackle, as opposed to the tight end Brock Bowers. Because one, thought he was going to be long gone. I knew he was a hell of a player. I thought he was going to be long gone. He had been mocked as high as number 8 and as low as 15. But I figured no way he was going to get past the Jets at number 10. And he did. And then he fell to the Raiders at 13, and they made that selection. And, after I sat there a little while and I watched the rest of the first round of the draft, I thought about it and said, why am I surprised? Tom Telesco literally said this on Monday, that was one of his things that he does is he's going to get the best player available. He told us a story about Keenan Allen, and this basically played out just in the same vein of that story. Like it wasn't an area of need. The offensive tackle was much more of a need. A cornerback was much more of a need. Quarterback was much more of a need. Tight end wasn't, even though the depth at the tight end position of real good tight ends isn't quite there. I mean, of course, you got Michael Mayer, who was a second-round pick last year, and now you get Brock Bowers, a first-round pick this year. I mean, that's a great 1-2 punch right there. And honestly, I know Brock Bowers is listed as a tight end, but, I mean, the dude is just a weapon, right? I mean, you can line him up anywhere. He can line up outside. He can line up inside. He can line up as a traditional tight end. He can line up in the backfield. He can do end-arounds, and he's a guy that's a dedicated blocker as well. So as much as we talk about the offensive line and it needs addressing, he can help out with that as well. He's definitely a dedicated blocker. He did a lot of that at Georgia. If you're at Georgia in the SEC, you pretty much have to be a blocker at that tight end position. But there's no doubt about it. They got a really good player. That's the one thing that I feel good about, even though I talked about it so many times that, Raider Nation was going to be fired up when the pick came in on Thursday. And I know that a lot of Raider Nation was not fired up based off the tweets and the text that I was getting. But with that being said, they didn't get a guy that wasn't projected to be selected around when they selected, right? Again, and he was mocked to go anywhere from 8 to 15. That's what I was seeing, anywhere from Atlanta to at 15, where the Indianapolis Colts were. So the Raiders getting him at 13 is really the sweet spot. So it's not like, okay, they reached for a guy or they, like they selected Damon Arnett. Now, it was funny because I tweeted out that he wasn't on my radar to be selected by the Raiders, but not this in the same vein as Damon Arnett. He wasn't on my radar at all, right? Not at all. Like, he wasn't even the guy I was thinking about in the draft, period, right? He was not a dude that, I would even look twice at. Brock Bowers, I knew how good he was. I watched him play. I know that he's a 2-time national champion. I just thought that he was going to be long gone and that the Raiders weren't worried about the tight end position at this time, right? That could have been something they did later on, or, just rolled with what they had right now with a couple backup tight ends. And of course, Michael Mayer, who they selected in round number 2. So on my show, my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, Raider Nation Radio 920 on Thursday, we had people calling in and asking for certain players, and we'd give them a draft profile. Not one person ever called in and asked for Brock Bowers. So again, a lot of the confusion came from just it being an unexpected pick. It wasn't something that, Raider Nation had been paying attention to and looking at. Now, there's a couple people, they hit me up and were like, man, that's a great pick. I love it. Another pass catcher, another weapon, but for the most part, everyone was pretty confused. But with that draft profile that I was talking about, I'll go ahead and play the Brock Bowers draft profile right now. This is something that, came out before the draft, obviously, but this is what I was doing on my radio show on Thursday. So here it is, the draft profile for Georgia tight end, Brock Bowers.
Brock Bowers, tight end, Georgia, 6'4", 240 pounds.
Looking to throw here, dumps it off short. There is Bowers. Bowers slips through a tackle into UT Martin territory. That's Brock Bowers, the reigning Mackey Award winner.
A 2023 unanimous All-American. Brock Bowers is a rare talent at the tight end position. Bowers brings a unique combination of explosiveness, speed, and route running ability that can add a layer most NFL offenses can only dream of at tight end. Bowers is a 2-time national champion at Georgia, where he holds the record for most receiving touchdowns in a single season with 13. Bowers has been projected as the best tight end in this class with no real peers.
So just a quick blurb right there on Brock Bowers. I like those little draft profiles. I think they're pretty cool, especially leading up to the draft, but also kind of recapping after you know what player is selected. And maybe in segment number 2, maybe we'll get into a couple of the draft profiles of guys that are still out there and available. Paul Gutierrez from ESPN, he put in his piece immediately after Brock Bowers was picked, and he said, why they picked him? A true mystery. Unless the Raiders' new front office of GM Tom Telesco and Antonio Pierce simply followed the board and selected the best player available, regardless of position. Remember, the Raiders used a second-round pick on Michael Mayer last year. He was coming into his own before a foot injury landed him on the injury reserve as he missed the final 3 games. Perhaps the Raiders envision a dual threat at tight end going forward. So I'll pause right there. A dual threat at tight end is not a bad thing, right? We've seen teams dominate with the dual threat at the tight end position. So that's not a bad thing at all. Again, I don't want anyone to think that this pick of Brock Bowers is a bad one. It's a pick that is more that probably what most of Raider Nation is going to look at as a luxury and not something that they really needed. But hell, I have been talking about, a luxury if they went and got a defensive tackle like Byron Murphy, who ended up going to the Seattle Seahawks. And if that's not a great pick, I don't know what is, right? I mean, there was certain positions. We have been talking about cornerbacks, and some people think that, quarterback is not something that the Raiders need, and that's more of a luxury. Tight end, same thing, right? Wasn't even talking about it. Wasn't on our radar, but here he is. He lands with the silver and black, and again, not a bad pick as far as I'm concerned. Paul goes on to say, biggest question, offensive tackle and cornerback were much bigger needs, and every cornerback was still on the board, so you have to wonder, why another tight end? Beyond that, perhaps Mayer's injury is worse than initially disclosed. Knee-jerk reaction, it's a confounding pick. That's from Paul Gutierrez from ESPN. And Michael Mayer does not sound like his injury is bigger than what it seemed at the end of the season when he missed the final 3 games. They put him on IR. That's something that Tom Telesco said after he spoke to the media or when he spoke to the media on Thursday following the first round. Matter of fact, and coming up in segment number 2, you'll hear just a couple minutes of what Tom Telesco had to say to the media. We'll talk about a few of the players that are still available that the Raiders could be looking at rounds 2 and 3 that we'll hear on Friday. And then, of course, 4, 5, 6, and 7 over the weekend. So we'll do that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find qualified professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And they're not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites at all. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're probably looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. They hire professionals like a professional, all on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, might not have the time or resources to hire. They're constantly finding ways to make the process easier, even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and even quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. What you need to do right now is post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef-designed recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, blackened mahi, comes with a full page of easy-to-read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to continue talking about the 13th overall pick, which is tight end Brock Bowers out of Georgia, and then also look ahead to what the Raiders could be looking at and maybe potentially address some of their needs as the draft continues to roll on. So Tom Telesco met with the media following the first round of the draft. He'll do that again tonight. He'll also do that at the end of the weekend. So when it's all said and done, when the whole draft class is put together, and I'll be back in Las Vegas for that. So I'll be able to be in the building. This time I had to watch it over Zoom, and that's okay. That's how it goes sometimes. I'm in Detroit. The only downfall from me being here is the fact that none of the players that the Raiders select this weekend are actually here. Right, I was holding out hope at first when Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell were still in the green room, and then they got selected by the Eagles and, of course, the Detroit Lions. And so once they were gone, it was a done deal. All 13 guys were out of the green room, so realized that I don't get to have that conversation with a new member of the Raiders. But, you know, hey, sometimes they're here, sometimes they're not. That's just how it goes. But here's Tom Telesco, just a couple minutes, couple questions asked to him. One was about how much contact they had with Brock Bowers leading up to the process. And then the other question, which was asked by Tashawn Reed, is about the whole Keenan Allen story that he told on Monday about literally taking the best player available as opposed to looking at the position for need. Check it out.
Brock had said that he was shocked that the Raiders made him pick. How much contact did you guys have with him in the draft process?
The normal amount of contact. You know, that's kind of the way we don't really like to put up billboards of who we're going to be, possibly interested in. But yeah, we did a lot of work on Brock. Our scouts have seen him for, obviously as freshman you're not eligible, but he jumped out as a freshman right away. But yeah, a good amount of work through the fall, through the pre-draft process, all the way through, just like everybody else. You do all the work on all these guys because you never know who you're going to be taking in reality. Now we do cut our board down pretty significantly, so we do a lot of work probably on a smaller group of players. But you have to be prepared for every scenario. So, and that worked out.
I know you said you guys love Michael Mayer and, he's still a part of the plans. Is there any concern about his injury?
No concerns at all with that. Yeah.
Brock mentioned he was shocked. Were you shocked that he was there at 13?
No, not shocked. I mean, you kind of look at where the, top 15, picks are, and, someone may be coming down. So the draft's unpredictable. It just is. So, we do this for a living, and we can't really, 100% dictate, who's going to be there. But you have plans together. I know as a player, they're trying to figure out where they're going to go, where they're going to spend the next, 4 or 5, hopefully 10 years of their lives, what city they're going to go to. And, typically, our scouts do such a great job in the fall process, and then in the winter during the All-Star season, and then even in the spring. We never feel like we have to all of a sudden, last second, do all this extra work on a guy. Like, our guys do a great amount of work leading up to it, so we're very prepared.
You told us that story about the Keenan Allen draft and kind of how that played out, and kind of drove home that point about taking the best player available. Pretty much everybody says that going into the draft. What does it take to actually sort of stick to that philosophy when you're on the clock and have to make a decision?
Every situation is a little bit different, but you try and stick to that when you can. Sometimes it's harder than you think sometimes, because you're adding to the football team, and we know where we are today, but we are looking for today and in the future. But with a player like Brock, just where the scouting staff, where they had him, what they thought about him, what the coaching staff thought, he was really pretty a consensus guy. Makes it a little bit easier, fully knowing that, we have Michael Mayer, who's an excellent tight end, but, there's no rule in the NFL that you can only play one. We can play 2 tight ends. We can move people around. At Notre Dame, Michael was split out sometimes as a receiver. Brock has been split out as a receiver. Brock has even played some running backs, some end arounds. And then our receivers can go inside and outside. So be a nice little group to work with.
So there's Tom Telesco. Just a couple minutes of what he had to say. If you want to go check out the whole meal deal, you can go to Raiders.com. They have it out on their social media. Listen to the whole thing. But he'll again address the media following rounds 2 and 3 at the end of tonight, and then he'll do one more presser just to wrap up the whole draft class. So looking forward, what do the Raiders need? Well, we know offensive tackle, cornerback, right? Those are 2 positions that we talked about leading into it. You would assume that they're going to come out of this draft with a quarterback. I don't know what quarterback that's going to be. Could it be potentially a Spencer Rattler? Could it be a Jordan Travis? Could it be someone like that? Potentially. But offensive tackle, cornerback, quarterback, I think that all remains the same. Wide receiver. There's some really good wide receivers that are out there that I could see them wanting to address and continue to bolster that room. I mean, they do need to score points, right? That's something that we complained about in 2023, is the fact that they weren't scoring points. So now they get Brock Bowers in round 1, and now they could potentially go back and get some good pass catchers as far as wide receivers go in maybe rounds 2, 3, maybe even 4, right? In a draft class that's pretty deep at the wide receiver position. At some point, they're going to address the running back position. I would think that's probably the 4th round or later, and even defensive tackle. They could add someone at the defensive tackle or defensive line in general, defensive tackle, defensive edge. I know that they have a lot of guys in that room right now, but if they find a guy that they think is a really good player, then they've obviously shown already that they're not going to hesitate to take him. Adam Schefter put out the tweet about the players available for Friday night that are still really good and out there. Defensive tackle Jerzon Newton, offensive lineman Jackson Powers Johnson, offensive lineman Zach Frazier, cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback Cooper DeJean, Cooper, cornerback Enos Rakestraw Jr., wide receiver Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver Ladd McConkey, wide receiver Keon Coleman. That's a guy I like a lot. Defensive tackle Braden Fisk, linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker Junior Colson, and quarterback Spencer Rattler. So those are just some of the names that Adam Schefter put out there that are still really talented dudes that are available. And, the Raiders could be looking at any of those guys. Adonai Mitchell, not really. I'm not a real big fan of him out of UT. He's got a few things like off the field that kind of he's a little concerned about. I don't know if those that'd be a smart guy for the Raiders to bring to Las Vegas, but that's one that I would kind of look at and say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. But there's still, as you can tell, plenty of really talented dudes. I mentioned Keon Coleman that, I really like him a lot. And I did those draft profile earlier for Brock Bowers. Let's go ahead and do a draft profile real quick for wide receiver Keon Coleman out of Florida State. Check it out.
Keon Coleman, wide receiver, Florida State, 6'4", 215 pounds.
Travis takes a step, lofts it towards the corner of the end zone for Keon Coleman. He's got it.
Florida State receiver Keon Coleman played the first 2 seasons of his college career at Michigan State before taking his talents to Tallahassee, where he caught 11 touchdown passes in 12 games and averaged 12 yards per punt return. Coleman became the first player in ACC history to be named first team all-conference at 3 different positions. He was a star basketball player in high school, and at 6'4", his ability to claim jump balls in the red zone is expected to be a major strength going into the pros.
So there you go. I think he's a really good player. I think he's going to get called, hear his name called pretty early on round 2. Don't think he's going to be, sitting around waiting for that phone call for very long because he is a really good player. He was kind of projected to be a second-round pick, so I think that he knows that that's a sweet spot. Kool-Aid McKinstry, the cornerback out of Alabama, the only concern I had with him was the fact that he has that foot issue. So I thought, even though he was, kind of penciled in to be a first-round cornerback, I thought that he was going to be a second-round guy because of that foot injury, and that kind of concerns me. As much as I like him, I think that he was, a 1-2 punch, great 1-2 punch with Terrion Arnold. That foot issue and him being a cornerback just kind of concerns me enough to stay away from him, right? Or maybe see how far he drops and then take a shot on him. But I don't know that. Like I said, he's supposed to be healthy though for training camp. But especially after last year dealing with Tyree Wilson having to deal with that foot injury, and it took him really a long time to get going, even though he's a much bigger man than Kool-Aid is. But a cornerback that uses his speed and has to cut on a dime all the time. It's just going into the league with a bad wheel. That doesn't sound like a good recipe. So there could possibility. Jerzon Newton, the big defensive tackle, he's a guy that a lot of people like, and he's a guy that would probably have to be part of a rotation. But I mean, he's a really, really good player. As a matter of fact, I got a draft profile on him as well. Check it out.
Jerzon Newton, defensive tackle, 6'2", 295 pounds, Illinois.
And looking for his defense to produce on another third down, and down goes the quarterback, Newton, the first to get to Hutchinson.
Newton became the first Illini in 29 years to be named Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, while earning consensus All-American acclaim. In 2023, Johnny totaled 52 tackles, 7.5 sacks, and an FBS-leading 4 block kicks. Newton's ability to attack inside and outside place him among the best interior pass rushers in this year's draft. He is undersized and has had challenges in fighting through double teams, but shows off an explosive get-off and quick feet.
So there you go. Big defensive tackle. Again, not saying that the Raiders are going to go get him, but a little bit of a surprise that he's still available as of right now. And then, the quarterback Spencer Rattler. And I don't have a profile on him, so I'll just go to Dane Brugler's The Beast and just let you know what he has to say about him. Of course, he's a guy that, was a big hot shot coming out of high school, went to Oklahoma, wasn't as successful as there, and then Caleb Williams beat him out. He goes to South Carolina, and, he has some success there. And really in the draft process, I think a lot of people really started to talk about Spencer Rattler a lot more than they were. But Dane Brugler in his Beast, the draft guide, says, a 2-year starter at South Carolina, Rattler performed well on offensive coordinator Logan's pass-first pro-style scheme. After a turbulent 3 seasons in Norman, he put steady play on film in 2 seasons with the Gamecocks and set the school record for career completion percentage. Despite inconsistent surroundings, the South Carolina offensive line had a different front 5 combination in 10 of the 12 games in 2023. With repeatable mechanics and an athletic release, Rattler has an NFL-level arm strength plus a natural feel for touch and poise in his process. However, his decision-making and timing must show better consistency, both in structure and out of structure. Overall, Rattler has a methodical play style and needs to be more urgent in his movement, reads, but he has the arm talent, self-confidence, and work habits that give him a fighting chance to work his way up the NFL depth chart. So there you go. That's a little bit on Spencer Rattler from Dane Brugler and his draft guide, The Beast. And let's be honest about the situation. Any quarterback that is selected today or later throughout the course of the weekend is not going to be a guy that you think is going to go in and be an immediate impact. Hell, Aiden O'Connell wasn't the guy you thought was going to go in and be an immediate impact. He ended up starting, 9 games down the stretch of the season for Antonio Pierce. So looks like it's going to be the Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew competition, and then there'll probably be another quarterback or two in the room just to battle it out. It could be a Spencer Rattler. It could be a Jordan Travis who's still coming back from his lower leg injury. Maybe they just kind of give him a red shirt. But those are guys that, I think that the Raiders will definitely consider sometime this weekend. But I don't expect them to be big impact players. So most likely the Raiders will start the season and end the season with either Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, or a combination of both at the quarterback position. But that's what I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Just, a little bit more on Brock Bowers and hear from Tom Telesco, and of course, a couple guys that are available for the Raiders throughout the course of the weekend. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts. Straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of our great sponsors, which is Monopoly Go. And, we've all been there. Either as a player or a fan, it's halftime, the scoreboard's not looking good, you're feeling low. Not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, you lift your head up and say to yourself, time to get back in the game. Pull off some bank heists, take some of my friends' money, as much money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches in the biggest empire. It's a Monopoly you love, but it's on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for their iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Raider Ken out of the Valley Joe. He's calling to talk about the decision to select Brock Bowers at 13 by the Silver and Black.
Q, what up? It's your boy, Raider Ken out the Valley Joe. I don't know how I'm feeling right now, man. The tight end thing, that guy's a dude. I can't deny that. But did that address any need at all? Are we missing something with Meyer? Is his injury worse than we thought it was and we just need another tight end? We could have got any cornerback. We could have got a O-lineman. I'm just kind of confused, man. I'm still a Raider, but I'm a little deflated. And I think the Michael Penix pickup by the Falcons threw a loop into everybody. I don't think that the Raiders were expecting it. And I think it threw them off. I just want to know what your thoughts is on that, man. I know it's going to be a lot of Raider fans calling in tonight. So we'll see if you get to answer my question. All right, man. Thanks for what you do. Have a good one. Raiders.
Thank you for the call, my man. The Falcons, they did throw everyone for a loop with the Penix selection. But, it's not a loop that they weren't prepared for, right? Tom Telesco, if you listen to the whole thing, he was talking about, the pick by the Falcons and, how they kind of looked at every kind of and analyzed every kind of situation that could be in front of them. And then they just, adjusted as need be. And that's the thing about Tom Telesco being an experienced guy. I don't think he wasn't prepared for anything. It was just, it threw me for a loop. I wasn't prepared for the Falcons to take Michael Penix Jr. there, but I think that the Raiders, not necessarily the Falcons, but they had weighed every scenario where, a quarterback can go really early. So they just simply stuck to their board, right? They had they had Bowers as a very high pick, and they took him. I just think it's just that simple. I know that it's hard to kind of, wrap our heads around because it wasn't what we expected, but the what we expected is what drew, the shock and the weird expectations, because I basically had gone into the start of round 1 feeling like, okay, it's going to be Michael Penix at 13. Like, I was pretty much locked in with, all right, it's going to be Michael Penix because Jaden Daniels is going to go number 2, which he did. As soon as he went number 2, I was like, all right, Michael Penix will be the quarterback, and he's not going to be here either. So I did continue to think about him or whoever the Raiders draft not being here and thinking, dang, missed out on a good opportunity. But it is what it is. So thank you for the call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Raider Nation Mason out to 406. Q, what? Bowers? I'm shell-shocked. I really am by this whole draft. Penix at 8. I need a reason, man. Do you have any inside ideas about it? Thanks, man. Raider Nation Mason out of the 406 Raiders. And no, I don't have any inside information. I had a lot of people ask me about Penix and the Falcons, and I thought, it's not really a bad idea. You got a quarterback in Kirk Cousins that's older, coming off of torn Achilles, that has a 2-year deal, and you have Michael Penix that's coming off of a national championship game appearance run, came up a little bit short, but, he doesn't have to play right away. I know that they gave him a bunch of, guaranteed money talking about Kirk Cousins. I know they didn't tell Kirk Cousins about the selection of Michael Penix at the last minute, but, I don't think it's a bad idea to have a succession plan, right? I honestly thought that the Jets should have done that, but they weren't going to do it because Aaron Rodgers would have got mad. But I thought that they should have done that because Aaron Rodgers ain't going to play forever. So I don't think it's like some wow moment that they took Michael Penix. It was just, again, kind of like Brock Bowers. Nobody really was talking about Penix to the Falcons, and especially not at 8, right? We were talking about, is he going to make it all the way through to round 2? Hell, he didn't make it out of the top 10. So I guess that would be the big wow moment when it comes to Michael Penix and the Falcons. But thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Matt. He's calling to talk about the first-round pick with the same feeling that a lot of Raider Nation has. Confusion. Here he is, Raider Matt.
What's up, Keith? This is Raider Matt calling from Orange County. Wanted to call in because, man, I don't know how to feel after tonight's draft. Kind of like just feeling numb. I get Brock Bowers is a pretty damn good football player. But I just don't know how picking him makes sense with the needs we need at O-line, or the needs we have at O-line. I mean, you had Fuaga right there. He's a day one starter, and I get Brock Bowers is probably a day one starter as well. But I think solidifying the O-line gets the team better sooner if we go Fuaga at 13. I don't know. Make it make sense to me, Q. Make me feel better. I'm sure a lot of other fans feel like me. I hope I'm not the only one. But I just wanted to make more sense. Appreciate you, Q. Want to hear your thoughts. Raider Matt, out.
Matt, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And you shared the same feeling that I shared as soon as I heard it. I was like, huh? Brock Bowers? 13? Not that it was a bad pick for them to get him at that number, but it was like, the Raiders really picked Brock Bowers? Like, okay, right? But it was the shock because I did not see that one coming at all, but again, a really good player. So that's the exciting part of it. Yeah, it was a shock. It might have been confusing, but at the end of the day, they got a really, really good player. And Tom Telesco just told us the other day, and I don't know why I wasn't thinking about that when the selection was made. Like, man, they really can go in so many different directions. And he just literally said that. But I guess, some of the things that these guys say, these GMs and coaches, we listen to some of it and we don't listen to the others. Like, I heard him. I listened to what he had to say. I digested it, but I just didn't retain it, apparently. So that's a me thing, not a we thing. That's on me. So thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Ryan in Delaware. Q, Brock Bowers plus Michael Mayer equals controlling the middle of the field. We've got Travis Kelce 2.0. Let's go. That's Ryan in Delaware. And that's a great way to look at it, right? I mean, 2 tight end set, that's going to be fantastic, especially since you've got Brock Bowers that can line up just about anywhere. He can be anywhere on the field. He's one of those guys that, once he catches the ball, he's going to run through the first tackle for sure. And Michael Mayer has those same kind of tendencies as well. He's always falling forward for extra yards. You started to see him come on towards the end of the season last year. So, again, for an offense that you're looking to get jump started, now you add this guy to a room in an offense that has Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and Zamir White at the running back position. Yeah, I mean, there's weapons to really appreciate and weapons to really like. Look, I mean, the thing about Brock Bowers is everyone was talking about and mocking him to the Jets, so Aaron Rodgers had another weapon. Think about that. I mean, Antonio Pierce and company just drafted a guy that was, potentially going to be another weapon for Aaron Rodgers. So obviously he's a really good player, right? So that's, one way to look at it if you're trying to figure out exactly what he could bring to the table. How about one more text? We'll get this one from Jay from Colorado. It says, Q, it's Jay from Colorado, been a listener since Black Hole Banter and have never turned back. With all that defensive talent that was on the board, it's an understatement saying I was shocked at the Brock Bowers pick. With Michael Mayer already in the mix, I just feel like it's the same bull, different year. Best on the board approach, maybe. I'd love to hear your insight. That's Jay from Colorado. And, you said it, best player on the board. That's exactly what it is. And that's something that, Raider Nation should get used to when it comes to Tom Telesco. He's going to pick the best player available. So round 2, round 3, pick 44, pick 77, They probably won't do a whole lot of trading. I don't expect them to do any trading back. Maybe they will do some trading up, but I don't expect any trading back. Whoever the best player available there, if that's their cornerback, if it's offensive tackle, if it's a quarterback, I mean, they're gonna. That's exactly what they're gonna do. We'll learn his tendencies sooner rather than later. I think it just kind of threw everybody off and kind of caught everybody off guard with the first selection. But again, it's not a bad selection. It was just one that wasn't on people's radar. So Jay, thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. That's all I got time for on today's show. And let's see what today's day. What it'll bring. Rounds 2 and 3. Who will be the Raiders selection? And of course, on Saturday, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we'll be back on Monday, and we'll talk about the whole draft class unless something wild and crazy happens and we have to do another show. But I'll be traveling on Saturday, so I won't be here in Detroit for 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'll be making my way back to Las Vegas. I've been here since Sunday night, so I'm ready to get home, to say the least. So Raider Nation, thanks so much again for all the support, all the love all week long. Hopefully the shows have not disappointed. Been having a lot of fun. Just doing what we do on the daily. We'll be back at it on Monday. So enjoy today's rounds 2 and 3. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, 4 through 7. And we'll be back on Monday here talking about the whole draft class. Until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.